Війна змінила життя кожного з нас, зокрема й життя наших дітей. Ми бачимо та відчуваємо ці зміни в їх поведінці, в їх іграх, в їх малюнках. Так, українські діти переживають різний досвід і тому потребують різної допомоги. Чим саме батьки можуть допомогти? Що саме робити? Про це розповіла доктор Ширі Деніелс, психолог з Ізраїлю в сфері освітнього консультування та лікування, в інтерв'ю з Родіоном Жизневським на Radio Ukraine International.
As you know, unfortunately, there is a terrible war in Ukraine today, and a massive amount of the population has already suffered from it. There are many destroyed cities, a lot of deaths, adults and kids under huge risk now. So now I would like to stay more on the psychological state of people who, let's say, are lucky to survive, people who experience these terrible things. And today we are about to talk about it, and in particular about kids and children's psychological traumas. Bearing in mind your experience of working with kids, what psychological problems do they tend to have during war times, depending on their age group? What symptoms can parents notice? How can they help their kids?
In times of crisis, feelings of helplessness and fear may lead to a wide range of reactions, such as sleep disturbances or eating difficulties. Children may begin to regress emotionally or act younger than their age. They also may become more clingy and needing of attention. Feeling irritably, anger and sadness may emerge, as well as somatic complaints such as headaches or stomach aches. It's important to know that these symptoms are all normal reactions to abnormal circumstances. It's also important to know that the vast majority of children recover from trauma without any professional help through the support of their relatives. Parents are the child's best support. In order to take care of them, you must take care of yourself. Maintain close contact with friends and family as much as possible. Maintain routine and turn to professional or additional support if needed. Try to maintain a healthy eating and sleeping habits. The second thing is to remember that our reaction is critical. Children are acutely aware of our reaction to the situation. Children learn how to respond to situations by observing the adults around them. That could be parents, daycare providers, or teachers. Try as much as possible to demonstrate calm behaviors. The third thing is to give children the attention they need, recognizing their feelings. Listening on our part provides the child with the opportunity to express his thoughts and emotion and to obtain a sense of comfort and security. Provide suitable information to the level of understanding of the child. Receiving reliable information is extremely important, as well as limiting the children's exposure to the news and media. Limit exposure to live coverage of tragic news. This is very important. Try to keep a normal routine and provide children with reassurance regarding their safety. Assure them that you are with them, you will go through this together, and they are not alone.
You said that it's really important, first of all, for parents to stay calm and not to share all these nervous things to their kids because they're feeling it like no one else. If we talk about kids who are, let's say, older than 6, than 7, who you could talk about the things that are going, you could talk about the news. Is it right to discuss the terrible events that we can hear on the news, or it's better to filter this kind of information when you are talking with elder kids?
Well, it's important to provide suitable information to the level of understanding of the child. In infants, there's no need, of course, in going on about the tragic and terrible war that is going on, although they do feel it. What is important is to comfort them, hug them, and be around them a lot. Now, with older kids or with teenagers, it's important to share the information, but not in a dramatic way. It's important to go over the facts and to answer their questions, but to reassure them that you are besides them and you'll go through this together. They are safe with you and everything will be okay.
Right. Thank you. Now, my question, it's about the kids and parents who already left Ukraine. Fortunately, there are some people who left Ukraine and they are still living, mothers, elderly people, and kids. If we talk about adaptation problems, what adaptation problems can we expect from kids who already left our country and who are now outside its borders?
Well, children's reactions will depend upon the degree of exposure to the trauma, their personality, the way they cope with stress, and the availability of support. So it is possible that although a child is not close to a danger zone, he can still suffer traumatic symptoms because he has less support or because of his personality. So it's important to continue to reassure kids, as we said before, and to pay attention to symptoms that could possibly show us that the child is in need of professional help. Now, in crisis, the good news is that in crisis, people are usually open for receiving help. And we must communicate information, this is essential, and organize natural support system. This is a high priority. So all organizations have to see that they have a team that could work together and could assist the needs that common in times of crisis.
Probably you could advise some public institutions, organizations located in other international foreign countries that could help Ukrainians, help our families with kids, with all these adaptation things.
There are three main categories of population needs during emergency. The first is the basic physical needs. The second is informational needs. And the third is social psychological needs. We must remember these and make emotional first aid services as well as counseling and therapy available for everyone. Sometimes we take care of the physical needs, we take care of shelter, food, and water, but we forget that people have the need to know what is going on. We must provide them with information. That means that all organizations have to keep information flowing. They have to teach the population about symptoms of trauma, about who to go to for help, about ways to help themselves. And the social and psychological needs are critical. We have to have emergency teams in all organizations to be there to map the needs of the population and see what resources we can bring to them in order to help all categories of needs that I just discussed.
If we talk about adults who are hosting the families with kids, the refugees, what can adults, parents, grandparents, those who are taking in refugee children do right now to strengthen and protect the children?
Well, I think the main thing is to sometimes sleep suffers because they have nightmares or dreams. So we have to be very patient, not to put pressure, but to be there when they want to talk and to play, to allow them maybe to express their feelings through drawing or through creating something. If they like to dance, if they like to do physical exercise, it's very good to let them express themselves in any mean that is relevant or that they like to do. It's important also not to judge them, not to tell them things like, oh, don't be a baby, or there's nothing to be afraid of, because kids are very smart and they know how to read the reality correctly. If I tell the child there's nothing to be scared of, so he thinks that he doesn't understand the reality correctly and he feels ashamed. He feels embarrassed. He loses belief in himself and his ability to deal with the situation. He also loses trust in the adult and the adult's capacity to help them. So it's important to acknowledge the fear, to say something like, I see it worries you, you're afraid. It is a frightening situation. Let's see how can we cope with it together. So not to judge, to listen. And it's okay to say, well, you know, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here for you. And maybe sometime when you do feel you have something that you want to say to the child, or you have the answer, you're more certain with the answer, you could go back and speak to him about it. Very important to be there and to take care of yourself and to allow the kid to cope in his own way and in his own time, not to hurry things up. It takes time, it's a process.
Yes, that's absolutely right. So people who are out of this conflict zone, they have to understand, they have to be really sensitive to people who just experience, who went through it, because it's almost impossible to imagine what these people, what these kids went through and what symptoms after the war they could show, how they could react, because even if you were in this city where there were not so many bombs, explosions, you're still living in this surrounding, in this, let's say, informational environment, and you always hear all these terrible things that are happening. And kids, what to say, adults, kids, they all experience it, they all feel it, and they express all these fears in absolutely different ways. So what you said, it's absolutely right piece of advice, that you have to put yourself on the position of that person, at least to try to imagine what happened with this or another person.
Right, I think it's a very important point what you just said, because sometimes the reaction to trauma is not immediate. It happens sometimes a delayed reaction. So we don't always know what's going on in a child's mind or heart, because children don't talk about their distress, they usually act it. So we have to be very sensitive to the signs of distress, as we discussed earlier, and to be there to support them and offer professional help whenever needed.
Right, that's absolutely right.
Maybe it's important that the psychological definition of emergency situation is an external situation which presents a threat to the person or the people who he loves, lives or emotional well-being. And it's important to understand this definition, because sometimes even if my life is not threatened, my emotional well-being is in fact threatened, or the well-being of the people I love, my family, my friends, and that could lead to the results of symptoms that we discussed earlier, that are important to understand and be able to identify.
You said about this delayed reaction, that not all the time we could see the possible consequences of these events and the effect of these events on our mind, on state of our kids, I mean psychological state. But still, if we try to, let's say, to define or to predict short-term or long-term consequences, what should we expect to see in kids' behavior after war? And probably you could say something about the rehabilitation tools that could be done to heal, to treat such consequences.
It could be physical, and it could be also social withdrawal from people and activities that we used to find meaning in. Those are the symptoms. They usually subside over time where after the threat has gone, but it takes time. It's not like we switch switch on and then we go from routine to a crisis. It takes time, and the circles of vulnerability are quite wide. So we need patience, and we need to take care of the different kinds of needs, as I was saying earlier. And it's also important to know that the common reaction to trauma is not post-traumatic stress. Usually, most people, mainly kids, will recover without professional help, but they do need the support of their family and loved ones. That's essential.
That's absolutely right. But if we talk about this rehabilitation of the psychological state of kids after the war on the governmental level, probably there are some big scale solutions from the past, from the experience of other countries. You could say that the government provided its population with that or another kind of psychological rehabilitation. Could you share some thoughts about this local kind of way of treating people on governmental level?
I would say the main thing on a governmental level, it is essential to make mental health a priority. That's the main thing, because sometimes we are too quick to go back to our routine. We put kids in their school and kindergarten, and we start teaching them like everything is fine and the war never happened. But it's not possible to go back from crisis to routine and back and forward just automatically. We have to be patient. We have to assess the psychological state that kids are in. What are their fears? What are the symptoms they exhibit? To be willing to allocate resources for counseling, for personal therapy, maybe for group therapy. We have to go over it, the needs with teachers together with mental health professionals, and to see how we can help them, but also how we can allow them to speak about their feelings and not be ashamed. We have to teach them that seeking help is very important, and it's a sign of strength, because sometimes kids and also adults are afraid to seek help because they think that that means that they are weak. But actually, it's exactly the opposite. People who know how to seek help are more resilient and stronger, and that's what allows them to regain their skills and confidence in themselves, in the others, and in the world.
Probably there is something that you would like to say to the Ukrainian people, to the Ukrainian nation.
I would like you to remember that fear and stress reactions are normal reactions to an abnormal state that you are in. I want you to know that everyone has the ability to cope. Kids, adults, the elderly, everyone. Every person deals differently with crisis. It's important to respect other ways of dealing with crisis as well as our own. And finally, I would like to say that it is very useful to ask for help and for you to know that you are not alone.